Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 56th ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Tennessee Titans reporter Paul Kuharsky. Paul, it's great to have you on.
Matthew, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on. And let's get right into it. I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to work in the sports industry.
Well, in high school, I thought I wanted to be a novelist. It came to me pretty quickly as I got into college that I didn't have any plots. And I grew up reading the New York Times. My dad was an avid newspaper reader. When I got to college, after first semester, it was kind of time to that's when things turned over at
Yeah.
all of the clubs and stuff. So I went to the school paper and I just kind of wandered to the sports section because I was a pretty decent sports fan and thought I knew my stuff. And started writing for the sports section and just kind of took off from there.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And, you've been covering the NFL for well over 25 years at this point. What's three things that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self about the journalism or sports industry as a whole?
Well, off the top of my head, I'd say don't. I'd tell a young me, don't expect it to be like this the whole time. Because it's changed an awful lot since I started. And I professionally, I wish I worked maybe a generation earlier, where newspapers were what newspapers were for a longer
Mhm.
time. Because
Yeah.
I would have liked to have worked in the
Mhm.
heyday of newspapers.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to. It's a good question with it requires some thought. Be a little more patient. I'm not a patient guy, so more patience along the way would have served me better, I think, and maybe be more understanding of middle
Mhm.
management. I'm
Yeah.
not. I was never a fan of middle management because I dealt with, I think, a lot of middle managers who I felt couldn't do what I did and weren't necessary in the framework of the places that I worked as middlemen, um, but didn't always serve me well to not make that work as well as it could have.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, you also, along with covering the Tennessee Titans, you're also a Pro Football Hall of Fame selection committee voter. Can you just describe what it's like to have a say in who makes the Hall of Fame each year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool to be a part of that whole process. It's been 10 years now, so I certainly don't take it for granted. But the first couple years, and having been in Canton a few times after, the busts in Canton are arranged by class year.
Yeah.
And so to stand in front of a few years of classes that I knew I had um, some small influence over being arranged in that fashion, it's a pretty intimidating thing to know you had a hand in and to look at those groups. I remember I was at I think Kevin Mawai's party when he was enshrined, and I think Kevin Green was. I might have the timing off, but I watched Kevin Green with his wife in when the just people at certain parties and Hall of Famers themselves were in the hall. And so it was very quiet in that room. And I was with a friend, and we were in the room with the busts. And I watched Kevin Green and his wife examining his bust up close. uh, maybe just hours after it had been placed there, or maybe a year after it had been placed there. But a moment like that, I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I cast a vote for Kevin Green, and I'm watching him look very closely at his bust. That's the kind of memory that sticks with you and makes you feel like you have some small uh, influence is too strong a
Mhm.
word, but some small touch on the history of the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And getting into some Tennessee Titans conversations, as we've gotten closer to the 2025 NFL draft, it's become clear that the Titans will most likely select Cam Ward with the first overall pick. Do you see Ward emerging as a franchise quarterback for Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, I mean, he is not a clear cut guy that you would say is coming into the league and going to light things on fire and lift the franchise.
Yeah.
And so I have some concerns. I could see why they would take him, being a quarterback needy team with a 3-14 record and having their choice of players in the draft. But I think there are some decision making questions and some accuracy questions that aren't necessarily the things
Mhm.
kind of things that get cleaned up automatically by an NFL franchise at the NFL level. And so I'm not all in. Now I'm not a draftnik either, and I
Mhm.
haven't. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched his entire college career or feel like I'm scout level film watcher or anything like that. If that's the choice they make, he comes in and obviously gets a clean slate, and it'd be an exciting thing to watch how he does or doesn't unfold for a franchise that hasn't had a lot of success at quarterback for a good while, barring a few good years for Ryan Tannehill and a system that featured his best talents. Um, but I could also see a scenario that would make sense. Wouldn't be well received by a lot of fans. Wouldn't be well received, I don't think, nationally, where they trade out of that spot,
Mhm.
get some significant draft resources to
Yeah.
address other areas of their roster, stockpile picks, and kind of stall for a year to wait for a better quarterback class next year and make a move to get one of those guys.
Now, everyone's obviously talking about what Tennessee should do with the first overall pick, whether they should take Cam Ward, potentially trade it like you mentioned. But not everyone is talking about some needs that they have to address during the later rounds in the draft. Are there any specific players or positions that you would like to see them go after towards the middle of the draft or maybe on day three?
Well, never mind day three. I mean, pick number 35 they've got, which is a urgent pick for them. Or if they traded out of number one, they've got two major needs at the edge. They don't rush the quarterback well. They don't have the
Yeah.
personnel to do it. Harold Landry's gone and had faded in terms of being a huge threat in terms of getting to the passer. They need a premier edge rusher. They could use two. So that's a big spot of need, and they need wide receiver help. Calvin Ridley did pretty well in his first season. It took him a while to get going. It'd be better if he was their second best wide receiver and not their first best wide receiver. It's a team that, for multiple regimes, has had trouble at the wide receiver spot. They hit big on AJ Brown and then traded him really foolishly after 3 years when they couldn't really figure out how to pay him when all these other teams around the league with guys in similar situations did figure out how to pay their guys, and he's gone on to great success in Philadelphia. So first and foremost, they need an edge rusher and a wide receiver, but they have a lot of needs beyond that. A tight end, um, inside linebacker, a third safety that could grow into a starter, an additional cornerback, a big running back that could be kind of a short yardage guy. So they've got more needs than they have picks.
Mhm. Now you mentioned the wide receiver position, and I think a name that is really interesting is Nick Westbrook-Ikine, who the Titans obviously just recently lost, and he went to the Dolphins not for a very big contract at all. We saw Westbrook-Ikine really take over in the second half of the season last year. I believe he had the ninth most touchdowns of any wide receiver, or tied for the ninth most in the entire NFL. Are you disappointed that Tennessee didn't decide to re-sign him? And why might not, they have not done that? Because I don't know if it would have been a big commitment based on the contract that he ended up getting.
Well, yeah, I mean, he scored 9 touchdowns, I think, in 32 or 33 catches, which is outrageous production. I don't
Yeah,
know that they
yeah,
could have expected him to duplicate that. Westbrook Akina really is a self-made man. Came in as an undrafted rookie free agent, gradually grew. Very reliable in terms of being where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. Not a lot of speed, not a lot of separation, had some limitations. So I don't have a problem with them moving on from him so long as they do a good job replacing him. At the money that he got, I mean, he got 3.2 guaranteed from the Dolphins
yeah.
over the course of 2 years. The Titans were like at 2.9 for 1 year. I think they could have come closer to giving him a deal that looked like the Dolphins deal to see if they could have kept him. I believe he's from Florida. I could see the appeal of going to Miami and playing in the offense there with a more defined role as a number three. He's been called on to be a number two too often in Tennessee, which maybe sounds appealing, but probably put more of an emphasis on showing off his limitations. Um,
Mhm.
so I think the Titans should have done a better job trying to keep him there. They've got a guy, Bryce Oliver's undrafted rookie last year, that they envision becoming, maybe a Nick Westbrook Akina type of player
Mhm.
who is faster, and if he pans out, can do a better job separating. Bryce Oliver could, conceivably be their 4 or compete with Van Jefferson to be their 3. They very clearly need a number 2. That's what we're talking about, a draft hole there, or a 1, bumping Calvin Ridley down. So we'll see, what kind of job they do in filling out that wide receiver room, as to how much they miss NWI. The thing about NWI is that he kept winding up higher on the depth chart
Yeah.
because of injuries. So they need their guys to stay healthy and for people to stay in their roles.
Yeah, and I know you touched on this a little bit. He was born in Lake Mary, Florida, which is under a 5-minute drive or a 5-hour drive away from Miami. So he obviously has that connection to Florida. And going to the defensive side of things, on March 11th, former Carolina Panther safety Xavier Woods signed a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Titans. He is coming off a career year in both tackles and interceptions. What can we expect to see from him in 2025?
The other thing, all of these guys that the Titans have signed as free agents play a lot of snaps, a lot of games, and a lot of snaps.
Yeah.
Durability has been really a big feature of what they're looking for. I wouldn't expect them to draft guys that have missed a lot of time, maybe a freak injury, but not any kind of consistent injury pattern or anything like that. I think Woods is a similar player to Amani Hooker.
Mhm.
They don't play so much strong and free as they play, just kind of two similar guys back there. They've been looking since they dealt Kevin Byard, who was kind of, starting to dip a little bit. Condre Diggs last year was starting to come on and then suffered a Liz Frank injury in his foot. And they lost him. Kind of had a scramble with parts there to make up for the loss. So I think Woods, should be a good player on this defense. In the back end, outside of depth, they're pretty sound, and they were pretty sound last year. But when there's no pass rush, it doesn't matter how sound you are. And they were sound there despite some significant injuries at cornerback, where they traded for L'Jarius Sneed, and he only played 5 games. They signed Chidobe Awuzie, who only played 8 games, and he's been released already in part of this push for durability. And they swallowed $12.5 million of salary cap hit to part ways with Awuzie, a cornerback who's now in Baltimore. But they like what they have at corner, where they're 4 deep, and now at safety, where Hooker and Woods should make for a nice pairing. And so, really, defense, they need to fill in front of those guys and get some depth around those guys. But I think they reasonably feel pretty good about themselves at corner and safety.
Yeah, now last season the Titans allowed just 177 passing yards per game, which was the second fewest of any team across the entire league. What can we expect to see from that secondary this year? Can we expect to see that same level of production, that same 177 passing yards allowed, or is it going to differ with a few new pieces in the secondary?
Well, that number's a little deceptive because
Mhm.
they gave up running yards
Yeah.
and their special teams were horrific.
Mhm.
So between turnovers and big returns, opposing teams found themselves in really favorable field position a
Mhm.
lot, and they did not need to throw for as many yards to have scoring success. So they were scoring 27 or 28 points against the Titans on a weekly basis, and the Titans were only scoring 18. So they're getting outscored 9 points a game on average, despite the fact that they didn't have to throw, that they were only throwing for 177. So I think the Titans played some effective pass defense, but it needed to be certainly contextualized. Um, Pass rush wasn't getting home by any
Yeah.
means, and they certainly were giving up their share of costly plays, of red zone plays, and the like. So I expect that number to be um, more a more conventional number in line with the league. Um, they need to that conventional talk about stop the run,
Mhm.
force them into passing situations where they can rush the quarterback more frequently, and they need better people, as we've hit on several times here, better people to rush the passer,
Mhm.
and force things to happen there. They need to force a lot more turnovers than they did. And hope is second year under defensive coordinator Denard Walker, uh, Denard Wilson, they'll have a chance to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another major free agency pickup that Tennessee made was adding former Broncos linebacker Cody Barton on a 3-year, $21 million contract. What's your thoughts on this signing for the Titans? What's his production going to look like next season?
He's an intriguing guy,
Mhm.
self-made guy.
Yeah.
Started out as a special teamer, and kind of fought his way increasingly into the lineup. Titans look at him as their 3 down inside linebacker, who'll be the play caller on defense. Um, should be a better coverage linebacker than they've had for the last couple years.
Mhm.
They relatively quickly traded Kenneth Murray, who did not play nearly as well as they envisioned when they signed him to a $7 million a year contract. They traded him to the Cowboys for a pick swap. Um, and so now it's that second inside linebacker position where they don't really have an answer. Cedric Gray, a fourth round pick last
Mhm.
year, was hurt a lot. They didn't really get a feel for him. James Williams, a converted safety who's got some real ranginess and some speed, but didn't make a great impression as a rookie, and took a while to get a chance. Those two guys, one of them hopefully steps up. They still may draft a guy there or pick up a veteran after the draft. Somebody needs to emerge to play alongside Barton. And if Barton were to get hurt, they'd be in trouble there in terms of experience. But they're counting on Barton to be the centerpiece guy. Titans don't believe in spending big dollars at inside linebacker. It's not a position. I mean, if they had one of the top 5 of guys in the league, they would.
Mhm.
But they don't chase those kind of guys, and they don't put a great deal of value on it. come forward and tackle, and hopefully turn and cover a little bit, but they don't ask too much in coverage of those guys, and that's a mismatch teams can get them in if they can force those inside linebackers into many coverage situations.
Yeah, and the Titans have made a lot of changes to their offensive line as well this offseason, including the additions of both Kevin Zeitler and Dan Moore Jr. How will this new O line impact the Titans next season,
Well,
especially if they bring in a new quarterback, obviously.
yeah, well, the offensive line has been the key to their troubles over the last several
Yeah.
years. Dennis Daly, a left tackle who was horrible, who took over for Taylor Lewan when he got hurt, and then um, no, sorry, Andre Dillard, who was a little bit of a flyer, a guy who sat mostly in Philadelphia, worked under a very good position coach there, came out of a Washington State program where they didn't run the ball very much, and he was also a big time failure. Drafted J.C. Latham last year, played him on the left, some encouraging signs, but faded. Now they were going to get a tackle in free agency, and it just turned out that Dan Moore they thought was the best tackle they could get, and he's a left tackle, so they're moving Latham to the right side, and then veteran guard. They're not big on 35-year-old guys, but Zeitler has played for several good teams, including Baltimore and
Yeah.
last year Detroit. Hopefully will be a steadying force, take care of right guard, and let them maybe draft a developmental guy who could come up behind him. So that's a good revamp. So they'll have more left tackle, Peter Skoronski, first round pick from 2 years ago, left guard. Lloyd Cushenberry, the center, who was a free agent last year, is coming off ruptured Achilles and may not be ready for the beginning of the season, unfortunately. So Corey Levin will probably fill in there if they need at the beginning. And then Zeitler and Latham should be a far better group than they ended last season with. And it's time for them finally to get both good pass protection and good run blocking and consistent play out of the same five. Bill Callahan's first year as the offensive line coach was disappointing. I think they expected to get more than they definitely expected to get more than they got out of some guys like Nicholas Petit Frere, who was a third round pick now 4 years ago. And they just didn't develop guys, didn't get production out of guys that they thought they could. They have better pedigrees up there now, and Bill Callahan needs to, from the start, have a more cohesive group that's protecting whoever's back there, be it Cam Ward, be it Will Levis, be it, hopefully not Brandon Allen. But they've got to have a better offense that can have some time to let things happen, have a quarterback that's better able to adapt to, or at least know where the trouble is going to come from more predictably. And I would expect them to have it. If they don't, there'd be some real questions about Bill Callahan in his second year.
And most of the major free agents have found new destinations or re-signed with their former teams at this point. But are there any still available remaining free agents that you would like to see Tennessee go after?
I'm curious about Elijah Moore, depending on how they do at wide receiver. But I don't know. Tyler Lockett,
Mhm.
is another guy. I know that old wide receivers are not something that they covet necessarily, but I think given the weakness of their group, they could use some additional leadership there, and I think he could still produce at a reasonably good
Yeah.
level. Those are guys I'll be keeping my eyes on, depending on what they do. If they draft two receivers, I don't think those guys would be in play. But if they only draft one, I would circle back to check on both of those guys.
Yeah, now recently the Titans added John Fassel as their new special teams coordinator. He spent his past 5 seasons as the special teams coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys. What changes can we expect to see in 2025 with Fassel at the helm?
Well, it changed out their punter. Ryan Stonehouse had an
Yeah. Mhm.
enormous leg. I don't think he was coached particularly well on how to maybe get better hang time and a little bit lesser distance to accommodate coverage, which was poor. Special teams last 2 years really, really bad. So they brought in Johnny Hecker, who Fassel has worked with in the past. He's an older guy, but certainly knows how to punt directionally. So we'll see a difference there. Joey Sly, they brought in as kicker. I
Mhm.
expect competition for him. He's got a big leg, but needs kind of to be, um, you know, brought brought into some more control, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah.
So that should mean the end of gosh, I'm going to forget Nick Folk. So two new specialists there. Fassel's going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt here after Craig Ackerman and Colt Anderson, two special teams coaches that were regularly under heat.
Yeah, now the Titans wide receiver Traylon Burks suffered an ACL tear midway through the 2024 season, which ended his season early. And 3 days ago, it was announced that Burks is unlikely to be ready for training camp and potentially the start of the 2025 season, per the Tennessee Titans head coach. And with Burks having an extremely underwhelming start to his career, he's hauled in less than 700 combined receiving yards in his first 3 seasons. What do you expect his future to look like in Tennessee, especially if he struggles to make it onto the field this year due to that injury?
Yeah, I don't expect him to have a future in Tennessee. I just he's very unreliable. He's
Mhm.
always
Yeah.
hurt. It hasn't produced anything. It's got to keep him around long enough for him to get healthy. But I think everybody is hoping that they'll have enough to be able to part ways with him in training camp. Just a matter of time before he gets hurt again, given his track record, and it seemed very unlikely that he would be breaking out at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just let him get healthy and moved on from him before he even got on the field again. And that's a bust of a move to trade AJ Brown and to
Mhm.
draft Traylon Burks with the hope that he would replace AJ Brown
Yeah.
to any extent.
Yeah, now, you obviously hear about the guys like Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley, the stars on this team, but are there any under the radar players that you think could take a big step this year or some breakout candidates in 2025?
Well, I mentioned Bryce Oliver. I think
Mhm.
he will be given a lot of opportunity to contribute in the wide receiver room. Tajay Spears got hurt a lot. I
Yeah.
think if they could use him the right way, I mean, he really is good as a pass catching running back. He's not as good as a running the ball. So you need to find a way to use him in the most favorable way.
Mhm.
And I would look for a tight end in this draft
Yeah.
to come in and have a real potential to contribute on offense. Other than that, this is a pretty bad roster that went 3-14 that doesn't have a lot of surprise candidates on it. If they were going to surprise, they should have stepped up and surprised last year. Maybe a Cedric Gray, 4th round pick that just never got started last year as an inside linebacker because he was hurt at the beginning. But Titans need to find new blood that can do things in this draft. They don't have a 3rd round pick because of the L'Jarius Sneed trade. He might be a can. He only played 5 games last year. He has a bad knee that keeps him from practicing a lot, and then he had a quad injury that turned out to be a big deal. They're certainly counting on him to have a chip on his shoulder about proving that he, was worth the pick that they traded for him. And if he could come out and have a year close to the kind of years that he had in Kansas City, I think that would be a surprise to a lot of his critics and really do a lot for the Titans.
Now you just said this, the Titans obviously had a 3-14 record last season, earning themselves the first pick in the NFL draft. What are some realistic expectations we can set for this team going into the new year?
Well, they're going to have to get steadily better as they go
Yeah.
and develop some people, or I think Brian Callahan will be in trouble. I don't know what that is numbers wise. I don't know if they know what it is. Amy Adams Strunk, the owner, has really kind of faded into the background and turned things over on the football side to Chad Brinker. And I think there's just a lot that we're not going to know until we see things in practice. But there is a little bit of awkwardness to Callahan being in his second year, Mike Borgonzi being in his first year. And so, that's a big topic of conversation, like how good record wise the Titans have to be for Brian Callahan to make it. They're certainly going to have to win more than 3 games, but I don't know if it's so much about the record as it is about the progress. They can't be losing games the way they did last year with just absolute foolish play, and Levis was at the heart of a lot of that. But they also, I mean, they drew way too many penalties.
Yeah.
They had difficulty with the red zone and things like that. They got to get better at some fundamental stuff to have a chance.
And throughout your entire time as a Tennessee Titans reporter, has there been a specific player that you would consider to be the funniest, favorite, or most memorable player that you've gotten to cover?
Well, I'm a little bit biased towards the early guys. It was a
Mhm.
different time. It was a looser atmosphere, and they were a better team. So, two
Mhm.
of my
Yeah.
very favorites from really early that were part of the team that went to the Super Bowl at the end of the 1999 season. Frank Wycheck,
Mhm. Yeah.
rest in peace, who I became, you know, pretty good friends with when we worked together on the radio after his football career was over, and Samari Roll, the cornerback, who I'm still in touch with, who gives me a lot of insight into what he thinks of particularly defensive back prospects coming out each year in the draft. Terrific, lighthearted guy who he hated to play in the cold. He would not warm up in on a cold day in Cleveland and stuff like that. Came out of the locker room as late as possible, things like that. But those are two of my very favorites.
Yeah, now I do have one final question to ask before we wrap things up. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster or journalist like me, what would it be?
Yeah, I give disheartening advice, unfortunately, on this, and it's to um, have a plan B because I don't know
Yeah.
what the business is. And look, I think a lot of people. It's an opinion driven industry to a large degree now, but you've got to establish yourself as somebody before people care about your opinion, and that part of establishing yourself is very difficult when you're not backed by a newspaper or an outlet that's letting you do the sort of reporting where you can begin to stand out and establish, be funded to go out and establish the relationships and do the daily reporting that gives you the basis for that expertise. But that's very difficult. So uh, be flexible as you plot your course, but I wish you the best of luck. But I think it's a very, very difficult business to under. I don't really know what it is anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up? Where can they find some of your work?
Well, check out paulkuharsky.com. It is a membership site, but there is a lot of stuff there that is not for members. I was just at the NFL owners meetings. When I'm getting news there, I'm obviously not putting that behind a paywall because I want people to see the news. That's when we get more analytical or dive deeper. That stuff becomes for members only. So if you're interested in the Titans in particular, I encourage you to come take a look and follow me at Twitter at Paul Kuharsky, the name you see on the screen with the NFL at the end.
I believe the site was down last night. I think it's back up
It's
now.
back. It's back.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, big thanks to Paul Kuharsky for being the 56th ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we will see you next time.